Bonjour. Hello. My name is Robin Klein. I am the Director of Merchandise and a member of the Indigenous Programming Team for the Portland Film Festival. I would like to introduce today Loretta Todd, the filmmaker for Monkey Beach. Good morning, Loretta. How are you today?
Oh, good, and good morning to you. How are you?
I am very good. Happy
good.
Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yes.
What was it in your life that put you on the path of becoming a filmmaker? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
All right. Well, becoming a filmmaker is not an easy task, no matter who you are, because it's sort of a multi-billion-dollar industry, and so if you're not part of a multi-billion-dollar industry, how do you find a way to tell stories? I've always wanted to tell stories. I was always so inspired by our storytellers and our elders who can just kind of take you on a journey with just a few words. So it's always something that was always in my heart, but it's never something I thought I could be. You grow up basically in poverty, and you don't think you can even have a future. You don't even think, well, what's my job will be. I don't even remember thinking, oh, well, I'll be this, or I'll be that. Although I think I told my mom once I wanted to be a dancer. So, but other than that, I don't think I was anything that specifically wanted me to become something. I started working for Indigenous organizations when I was quite young, volunteering, and then later, as a student. And it was always, there was this sense that, for one thing, I was living outside my territory. So I'm originally from Alberta, from the Whitefish Lake First Nations and St. Paul de Métis, which is two of the kind of most immediate places for my family's from, but, stretches back further as well. And but I ran away from home when I was quite young, and I ran away to Vancouver, and I was very conscious of the fact that I was not in my own territory, I was in somebody else's territory. And as I worked for other Indigenous with Indigenous organizations and such, and I was even more aware that I was in, West Coast territory. So over time, after different work and going to university and so on, there was a part of me that said, okay, how can I live in someone else's territory and still be of service? And so one of the things I thought, well, I have this kind of capacity to tell stories. I have this capacity to create visual imagery. And so being a filmmaker allows me to be in service to the community and at the same time let my own vision and expression come out. So I think that's, a quick way of saying it. Of course, there was many other paths to that. But certainly that would be one of the kind of sparks that started me.
What brought you to this project? Why bring this book to the screen?
Well, when I went to film school, I went to actually, at the time, it was kind of more an experimental film school, which is sort of my choice, because I wanted to deconstruct, the imagery that, had been so much we've had to live with, because that imagery, those stories, those films that have been so oppressive to from Western and so on, all the stereotypes. So there was always this idea of deconstructing, and also this idea of decolonizing. How do we create imagery and stories that sort of decolonize this thing we call filmmaking? So I've been making documentaries, and I've been doing different projects over the years, and I'm very proud of the work that I've done. But I had always wanted to do features. I'm a little ahead of the curve, so we were knocking on the doors of the financing here in Canada to get different features done. There was other people who asked me to direct scripts that they had made, that they had written, but it didn't happen. The guy who Thomas and Smoke Signals, Dr. Evan Adams, he's now a doctor, at the time asked me to direct a script that he'd written. And so, we were trying. It wasn't that we were trying. But somehow, when the book came out, Monkey Beach, a couple years later, when it went into paperback, I was at an event and this lady, this producer in Vancouver, said to me, "Gee, you should option Eden's book." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because your filmmaking is like her writing." So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I rushed out to get the book. I had meant to read the book, but of course, very busy. So I got the book, and in the book, even before I hadn't even met Eden, and in the back, she has an acknowledgement, and I'm one of the people she acknowledged. She had seen one of my films, and she had documentaries about Native War veterans, and she had used that for some research, but I guess also as a kind of acknowledgement of being inspirational to her. So that was kind of the first way. I mean, then, I had to option it, I had to deal with lawyers and agents and all those things. And again, being ahead of the curve, it took a long time to kind of get to the place where I am now. But I think above all was Eden's writing. She's such an amazing writer, Eden Robinson, the woman who wrote Monkey Beach. She's such an amazing, she creates so many layers of time and place, even within one page. So as a filmmaker, it was such an amazing, I thought, oh my God, if I could take this amazing elliptical storytelling that shifts through time and yet so true to character, it would be, so it would be so, I don't know what it is. Like as a filmmaker, you want to do something that's, spectacular, that's, magnificent, that's wonderful, that's going to change, your own life, but the life of others. You want to create something that's going to leave some hope and beauty in the world. So, so that was kind of the challenge. And then also really Lisa, the character Lisa, she has such a deep, deep love of family. She's carrying so much grief, and yet she has so much love for family. And I think that's one of the things that I think non-Indigenous people don't realize about us, that despite all fracturing of our families, really at the core, we love our families and we love our nations and our territories. And it was so important for me to be able to convey that. And Lisa just embodies that. So it was also a chance to kind of with that, but also deal with this idea of Indigenous women having medicine. And I think the power of Lisa is that she carries this medicine and she's afraid of that medicine, and she has to embrace that medicine as scary as it is to her at times. And I think that's the thing, a message was strong for me, is how it emboldens us as Indigenous women to embrace our medicine. And I think that's one of the reasons I really wanted to make this film and turn it into something special.
Well, it really resonated with me. I must say, watching the film, it that's what I can say for myself. It resonated with me. Can you share any favorite moments or challenges that you faced during the production process?
Well, one of the things is that, it took me a long time, to try to make this film. At the beginning, I worked with another Indigenous producer, Jeff Bear, and, we had a creative falling apart, although we're still good friends. But the rest of the time, I sort of been on my own. So the fact that I was together with people, real live people, and I fought as hard as I could to get as many Indigenous people in the crew, just to be, to know, like my other projects, like I do children's series right now called Coyote Science, about Indigenous science. I usually have like 100% Indigenous crew, and so it's always so good to be surrounded by your own people on, on set. So that was one of the good things, is to see all our faces there. I think the other thing is that it took so long to get here, but also the funding has changed, it's opened up here, so that's a good thing. But it also meant that basically we got approved by the telefilm, like I think in June, which meant either film next year or film right away, because it was always my commitment to film in Kitimat. And Kitimat's like an 18-hour drive from Vancouver. It's up in the middle of the province where they get a lot of rain. So I knew that if I didn't film right away, it was not going to be possible to the following year. So so the only time we could, I've always been told to film in August. That's the driest part of the, the year. But I couldn't film in August. I filmed in September. But oh my God, it was sunny every day. There was a little bit of overcast, but really there wasn't much. And so that was a beautiful thing. It felt like sort of a blessing in a way. And to be able to kind of grow your confidence as a filmmaker, you go in, and I mean, I've filmed documentaries, I've done experimental things, I've done children's series, I've produced, direct, showrun, I've done all these things. I've raised millions of dollars in my career, but to, finally be on set as the director of a feature film with all these people with these expectations and all these funders thinking, should we invest in her or not? It's kind of a bit daunting. So to be able to get through that and to know, embrace your own power, I think that was a really, good thing, to know that I can do this, this is something that I can do. And I don't know, it's sort of it's funny, I guess it's sort of like, just gonna go back to Lisa's character in the medicine, it's just embracing, your own power. And it's interesting because, you see all these stereotypes of what the director is supposed to be. There's a kind of the nerdy white guy with the little horn-rimmed glasses or whatever. Or there's the big tough, white guy, or, this sort of really cerebral, cool black, woman and men directors. Like, who is a Native woman director? Like, what are you supposed to be? How are you supposed to act? And so really in the end, it was just like, I could be me and I could still be a really good director. So I think those are some of the good things.
What was your casting process like? Was it hard to find so many Indigenous people to fill your actors?
Well, because it's taken a long time for me to make this film, I had seen many Lisas. And sadly, they got older. And so some of them I couldn't, they moved on, or maybe, they had that, so I had to find that perfect Lisa. And, I think that was the real key. Although, to be honest, there were many other people who could have been just as good. There's so many amazing Indigenous actors now. And so there could have been many other actors who could have been, as amazing as Lisa. As great stuff. But I think in the end, it was something about her. And so I worked with a casting director, and, I have a lot of respect for her. I know the 1491s and others try to mock her, but there's this lady named Renee Haynes, who's a non-Indigenous woman who's cast a lot of the, the Indigenous films, ones that have large Indigenous cast in them, anyways, I worked with her, and she's familiar with everybody. She knows who's out there. So she had made some recommendations. But, being in Canada, of course, you're always aware of his work, and Nathaniel Can's an old friend. I've known him for many years. I did my first, I cast him actually in his documentary, but it had these dramatic elements in it. And that was like, basically, he had done an educational or industrial film, but that I was like the first one who gave him his real job. So we kind of started together in many ways. So Nathaniel, I always wanted to work with him again. Tina Lehman is kind of an unknown, the one who plays Mama O. And she was she had been in a TV series here in Canada. But there was something about her. One is because I was trying to get as many West Coast people, being again this idea of being from the prairies and being on the West Coast. And there's so many of us prairie actors because we kind of got the I'm not the actor, but Native, the sort of the idea of what Native looks like, with the high cheekbones and, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the West Coast people are very, more, they have a different look than us, and so I tried as much as I could to have West Coast actors, or at least people from BC, if it's a BC story. So Grace is from Prince George, which is, a little ways from the area and a little bit different territory, but still. Tina Lehman is out from Alberta, but she has a look. She has a West Coast look to me. So it was a kind of combination. Stephanie Mathias, when we were trying to make films, back in the day and trying to raise money for our features, and none of us, it didn't happen for us. Stephanie was one of the people who auditioned for a script that I was trying to, turn into a feature. And I always vowed that I would, one day cast her. So I was so happy to be able to cast her as, the mother, Gladys. So it was, and then of course the budget didn't allow me. There was some people who auditioned, like professional actors who auditioned for a couple of roles, but the budget would mean having to bring them to Kitimat and so on. And so I had to make these difficult decisions to work with non-actors in the neighborhood. But I'm glad I did, because it made the film feel more like it belonged to the people. So there's probably about 4 actors that are, some of them are in small roles, but some are in more significant roles that were non-actors. And so that was a kind of we put out audition calls in the neighborhood, in the territory, and those were people who, sometimes it was the only people, like the 2 elders, they were the only elders that showed up for the audition because they're sort of, I guess, shy elders, and they were actually from the neighborhood. So that's the Haisla territory. They were from the Niska territory, which is like a little ways over. And I guess Niskas maybe aren't as shy. So anyways, they, not to say the Haisla are shy, but anyway, so it was a combination of, working with a casting director, trusting my gut, knowing people who I wanted to work with, and then just sort of those magical things that happen when you're casting.
Did you stay true to your script? Or did you encourage improvisation from your actors during filming?
Well, the script had gone through many, many years, because different times, you think you're close, and then telefilm and say, oh, you're always close, or it's too long, Loretta. Like I had like 140-page, 150-page scripts at some point. And so I kept having to, and it still breaks my heart that there was so many parts of the film of the book that I had to leave out, but in any case, I had to find something that was, going to work with the budget and the shooting time and so on. And so, I got it down to about 104 pages, and I know there pretty well, we stayed the script. I think there were a couple moments where the actor said, "What about this?" And I said, "Yeah, that will work." It wasn't a major shift. It wasn't like a big change, but it was maybe a 1 line or 2 lines that really sort of changed the energy of the scene. And that really worked. Sometimes, there's not enough time, and I go, okay, we can just shoot it this way. I did. There was a couple scenes I took out. I shot them, but I took them out. I didn't put them in the editing. Not that they weren't good. It's just that, as well as I thought they would. But pretty well, I think. We stayed pretty true to the script. I think, yeah.
Did you encounter unexpected, unplanned magic moments while making this film? Or
I do. I really think that weather, the fact that it was sunny, or didn't rain, everyone was astonished, because there's never been a September where there hadn't been rain, and some people said there was some guidance from the other side, to help us with that. There certainly was, there was some behind the scenes stuff that wasn't always pleasant, because of, sometimes 2 worlds coming together, the independent filmmaking world and the sort of, I had my co-producing partners. There's sort of a different way of doing things. So sometimes there were some challenges, but I think overall, I worked really hard, and I had a really amazing, she was an old friend, 2 amazing women. They're both old friends, but particularly Lucretia, I did, and Robin Weaselbear. They were kind of like my protectors, and, I got to give them a shout out. Robin was my scriptie, and Lucretia came on as locations, but then I asked her if she wanted to be my assistant. So she became my assistant, and you know, at the end of the day, you know, end of the shoot, she'd pick me up and, you know, drive me back. So I had to work the rest of the night, you know. So I always felt this kind of protection of these strong Indigenous women. So that was something that was really sort of unexpected, you know, and I think, you know, I really value that. I don't know if I could have got through it without that from them. It was, you know, untold, it was unsaid. It wasn't like, oh, we're here to protect you. It was just what happened. And it was, I think that was really magical. I think sometimes, oops, I just dropped, I was just holding a rock. Sorry. There was, I think sometimes there was those moments where there's some really difficult stuff to get through, like the scene with Lisa and Karaoke, when Karaoke tells the story about what happened. And, you know, Takaya is a very amazing, she's an activist. She's, you know, her whole life she's been basically an activist for the water and for the land. And but she's also become an actor in her teenage years. And so she had done things, but this was like a heavy scene, and it was wonderful to see how Grace Dove helped her through that, but also that I was able to kind of get her to a place where she felt comfortable in that performance. And so those things like that were magical, you know. And you know, asking the actors, you know, how would they, you know, how, you know, like rather than just assuming this is the way I'm going to tell you how to do it, sometimes I would say, okay, like like a lot of them seem to appreciate me talking them through. So as the scene's happening, I'm behind, you know, and obviously not stepping over their lines, but I'm actually literally at that moment, say, you know, taking them to the point where they could start crying, you know. And like in the case of Mika Whiskey Jack, when she's standing there, remembering the teen Lisa, remembering, you know, her somebody in her life, and being able, you know, talk her through that so she could get to that place of, you know, that emotional place. You know, there were lots of magical moments. You know, there was the fact that, you know, we were, I don't know, it was like we felt really productive. I think we felt really, really productive. Like we'd get our day, we'd get our shots, we get pretty well, you know, what I set out to do in a day, you know. So I just wish we'd had more time. That would have been nice.
Not enough time in the short amount of time that you have for shooting.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a young filmmaker, or maybe not even a young filmmaker, someone who wants to start out being a filmmaker, who didn't think maybe they wanted to become a filmmaker, or who just was a storyteller who wants to start out? What advice would you be giving them, or could you give them?
Well, you know, you know, I haven't taught filmmaking very often, but occasionally I'll go in and teach. There's a program here in Toronto, Vancouver called the Independent Indigenous Digital Filmmaking Program. And I'll go and teach there or do workshops sometimes. And one of the things I always say to them, and, you know, there'll be, you know, teenagers, just, you know, out of high school going there, and there'll be elders. You know, there was one time an elder, a guy in his 60s who had made Super 8 music videos for his rock band back in the day, you know, and he wanted to become, you know, he wanted to do more training. And, you know, so, you know, to me, you're right. It's not just young. It's like, you know, it's the whole, you know, someone in their life, no matter when, they might say, I want to be a filmmaker, or they should embrace it and not be afraid of it. It doesn't matter, you know. But one of the things I always say is, what moves you? Like when you look out, like, because it's all light and shadow, right? I mean, you know, really it's light and shadow. So what moves you? What about when you were growing up? What was a beautiful light to you? Was it dawn? Was it dusk? Was it night? Was it, you know, if you grew up in the city, was it, you know, neon light on a, you know, after the rain, and the neon light, you know, reflecting in the rain, in the puddles on the street? Like, what is it that has moved you, that startled you, that you looked at and said, oh my God, that's so beautiful? Like, to find out what about light is meaningful to you, because you have to know that you have to know what helps construct an image. You have to like really have almost an intimate relationship with what is light and what is shadow, and not be afraid of that. And even though it sounds kind of all arty, but it's true, you know.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I'll just get them to make images just of that, like just of like way the light falls on something, or and really get to know light, and really get to know what moves you as as filmmaker. Like, of course, a lot of young people with horror films, but what vampire film, or well, I guess vampires are out, but I mean zombies and horror. So like, but what about that moves you? Like, it's not just to replicate and duplicate and do what everybody else has, but what is it about those films that really startle you, or make you think, or moves you, or to how do they put that together? And to really study that, as annoying as Tarantino is, whenever I hear him speak, and not every one of his films I like, but he basically said his education was watching films. So like, just watch films. And for me, I mean, I guess living in Vancouver, there's an advantage because there's the Vancouver Film Festival and other film festivals. There's many, like the Asian Film Festival, there's a Latino, there's so many film festivals that you get to see films from around the world. And that was always important to me, because I wanted to see how people made films that weren't from Hollywood, weren't from, the usual places. So I was really intrigued by films from Japan, from countries in Africa, just to see how differently they put together a story, and how they put people within the space of a screen, and how they edit from here to there and get you from this moment to that moment. To me, that was really interesting, because then it kind of like twirled around my brain, so that I'm not just thinking the way Hollywood goes, which is like establishing shot and then close up and like all those kind of standard things. It made me think that you could tell a story in these different ways. And so I think that's my advice, is just to really, if you love film, then just look at everything you can. And then also nowadays, with there's so many other influences from different screens, small screens, big screens, like how can you play with that? How can you deconstruct? How can you decolonize that space? But ultimately, in the end, it does become, what do they say? Those old time, the elders say that, the hardest journey is from the head to the heart. So, you think about it, but in the end, it has to be what makes you, like, what's in your heart. So that would be my other thing, is not to be afraid. You can start in your head, and you need to have all that vocabulary. It's helpful to know all those things about film, but ultimately it becomes something that has to be in your heart. And I really think Indigenous people, like, I do the Indigenous series Coyote Science because I believe that we as Native people are natural scientists, but we're also natural filmmakers. We're natural storytellers. And, we've been doing this since, time immemorial. And, our our storytelling is so cinematic, but it's not that linear beginning, middle, end. It sort of takes us all over the place. And to embrace that, not be afraid of that, even if they tell you, no, it's got to be this way.
True. Well, what is your next project?
Well, we're still wrapping up season 3 of Coyote's Crazy Smart Science Show. So that's been a little difficult because of COVID. So we've had to create these bubbles where people can film with their own kids within the bubbles. And fortunately, I've built up a good group of Indigenous directors and cinematographers over the years who have kids who, now can be in the series. I developed a new an animated series, kid series, that I'm in development with now, called Natanis and Skylar. Tanis means daughter in Cree, and it's just a cute little show. We'll see. I mean, I kind of like animation, and Coyote Science, I combine animation with live action and so on. And so I really like animation. So that's something more I'd like to go into. I'm adapting some scripts now, I think, into graphic novels, so that I can kind of, maybe that's another way to bring them into the place to help getting some financing. So I'm working on that. There's a friend who has I know Richard Van Camp, who was one of the people who helped make Monkey Beach happen, who's an amazing writer here in Canada. He has a graphic novel that he's offered to me to option, and then in fact it has a Japanese and Indigenous connection. So it's kind of interesting because that's kind of thing that's sort of haunted me my whole life, is that whole kind of connection. There's a whole other story about that. Maybe one day I can turn into film, but yeah, I've got lots of projects, and I've got my own script. So hopefully there will be something, new feature I can start making next year.
What do you hope that viewers will take away from seeing your film?
It's difficult in Indigenous lives because we have so much trauma. We've had so many centuries of oppression, of genocide, and so it's so hard to make a film and say, how do we not have the film about that? Like, how do we not deal with that because we deal with it every day? And so, in the book, there was always a sense of hope. There was always a sense of again, to go back to, embracing your medicine. And I think that's what I knew that I could have gone more social realist. I know I could have gone that direction, that kind of in your face, this is this is the way it is. But I wanted to go more into that realm of magical realism, not because as an escape, but because I think, and Eden Robinson said this when she's talked about her book, it's this idea of double exposure, that, when we look at the territory of the real strong people with medicine and the strong storytellers, when they look at what is the material world, they see beyond the material world, and they can see what's beyond this material world. And so I wanted to give a glimpse of that's a, and in a good way, like in a kind of a practical way, like a kind of a way, but ultimately I wanted it to be hopeful. And every film, I remember I made a film about Indigenous war veterans and how, the Canadian government basically treated them really bad, about a group of Indigenous women and how they overcame residential schools. And I've made a bunch of different films about different things, and my kind of hybrid documentary style. But every time before I went in to make those films, I would ask them, and most of them were elders, I would say, what kind of film do you want me to make? Like, what message do you want? And every time they said hopeful. I mean, I think our people, our elders, those who've gone on before us, they want to leave hope for the future generations, and to the point where it's no longer hope. It's beauty. Like, we don't have to keep having to live with hope that we're going to overcome this, because we've overcome it. And I think that's what's really important for me, is that people feel the hope, and that we can have all this trauma, we can have all this genocide around us, and yet we're resilient, we're powerful, and we do overcome.
And we still are here.
Yeah, we still are here.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Loretta, for this movie, and for you talking with us today. It's really a beautiful movie, and I would like to remind the audience to virtually vote after the screening, and to thank everyone for watching the movie and supporting independent voices, and that they should go to the virtual festival lobby and connect to the filmmakers, and they can also go to pdxfilm.com. So again, thank you so much, Loretta. I hope to see more of your work. I did look you up, so I'm going to look at some more of your work. And I have 2 grandsons, so I'm going to see about looking up that coyote sciences that you have. So
Yeah, it was playing. I don't know if it's showing yet, but I think VNX bought it. Out of down in San Bernardino. So I'm not sure whether it makes it to Oregon. And I don't know whether it will come into the States, but you guys can let me know, and I can always send you links so you can watch some of them. But I don't know if it's available outside of Canada except through VNX. But yeah, no, thank you so much. It was so lovely to meet you. I hope we get to meet in person one day. And I really value that you're part of Portland Film Festival. I'm glad that your voice is there. And thank you so much for your thoughtful questions today. And yeah, I hope everybody enjoys the film and gets to love it as much as me. I mean, I know I'm the filmmaker, but really, I'm swept away by it. So I hope they feel swept away by it as well. So hi, thank you.
Hi. Thank you.